Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into a really fascinating report that looks at one of the world's biggest health challenges, child malnutrition, and tackles it from a totally different angle. Not with more food, but with something way more powerful, knowledge. And this whole explainer really hinges on one big question. What if we've been looking at this problem all wrong? What if the key isn't just about filling bellies, but about filling minds with the right information? As you're about to see, just thinking about it that way changes everything. So when you think about global malnutrition, the first thing that probably comes to mind is scarcity, not enough food to go around. But what this report uncovers is something way more nuanced. It's often a crisis of knowledge. And this leads to something the report calls the malnutrition paradox. It's kind of wild. On one side, you have over a third of young kids who are undernourished, they're stunted or not getting key nutrients. But at the exact same time, childhood obesity is on the rise. And believe it or not, both of these massive problems often spring from the very same root, what the report calls inappropriate feeding. This brings us to the absolute heart of the matter, the knowledge gap. The report makes this powerful argument that, a lot of the time, the biggest threat to a child's health isn't an empty cupboard. It's the sea of confusing, conflicting, and just plain wrong information that parents and even health workers are swimming in. That gap, that's the real bottleneck. All right, so that's the big idea. But what does this actually look like on the ground, in the real world? For that, we're going to zoom into the Japa district of Nepal, where this knowledge gap was causing some serious problems on the front lines of healthcare. I mean, just try to put yourself in the shoes of a local health worker there. You've got families getting advice from grandma, from community traditions, and then you've got these slick, aggressive ads for baby formula. All of this information is swirling around, often contradicting each other. How are you supposed to give clear, solid advice in the middle of all that chaos? And the solution they came up with? Well, it wasn't some massive nationwide program. It wasn't even hundreds of people. It was just 35. That's it. That's the number of dedicated health workers from local, public, and private hospitals who were brought together for one super-focused training designed to do one thing: bridge that knowledge gap. So, you've got your 35 health workers. The big question is, how do you arm them with the clarity and confidence to cut through all that noise? Well, the answer was a really intense 3-day training program. And this was so smartly structured. Day 1 was all about building the foundation, getting the science right, understanding the local situation. Day 2 dove into the nitty-gritty, tackling the common, everyday problems that they all face. And then, Day 3 was all about putting it into action. It was a perfect progression from knowing to understanding to actually doing. Yeah, this was definitely not your typical sit in a chair and listen training. It was about building a practical, repeatable skill set. First, you learn to listen and understand the full story. Then you learn how to observe and see what's really going on. After that, you practice the art of counseling, and finally, you take all of it and apply it with real patients.
But, of course, an intervention this focused and hands-on isn't free. So let's talk numbers. What did it actually take resource-wise and make this change happen?
And when you look at the budget, it tells a really interesting story. The biggest line items weren't for fancy tech or anything like that. They were for the people. The allowances and meals were what made it possible for 35 busy professionals to actually step away from their jobs for 3 whole days. And the manuals? That was an investment in making sure the learning stuck around long after the training was over. So the grand total comes to 348,550 Nepalese rupee. That's the full investment it took to empower these key professionals with skills that could literally change health outcomes for their entire community. All right, so we have the problem, the people, the training, and the cost. But here's the million-dollar question. Did it actually work? What was the real-world impact? And the answer is a resounding yes. The impact was huge, and it was immediate. The report makes it clear that participants didn't just leave with better knowledge and skills, like knowing the right positioning techniques. They left with a totally renewed sense of purpose, ready to be true advocates for what works. And you don't just have to take the report's word for it. The feedback from the people who were actually in the training says it all. The report mentions folks like Dr. Asraya Kadaria and Ramala Baral, who were actively sharing their own experiences. This wasn't a top-down lecture. It was a real, collaborative exchange. And this is where you really see the magic. The impact wasn't just on 35 individuals. No, this one training created an entire network of skilled, confident counselors.
These 35 people became a go-to resource for their communities, poised to help hundreds, maybe thousands of mothers and babies over the course of their careers. It's a classic ripple effect.
Which leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. This small, focused, knowledge-first approach worked wonders for 35 people in Nepal. So what would it take to replicate this? What would it take to scale it up and turn that small ripple of change into a global wave?